details emerge of Las Vegas' Stephen C. Paddock real estate gambles. As more details emerge about the life of Stephen C. Paddock, one thing is clear: on paper, he does not appear to fit the typical profile of a mass shooter. The 64-year-old former accountant who carried out the deadly massacre in Las Vegas on Sunday night was a successful real estate investor who stayed in touch with family and took care of his mother. He was a gambler, but not a reckless one. It appears Paddock liked to have a strategy. Over the past 3 decades, Paddock was involved in nearly a dozen real estate deals. At first, he invested in small apartment buildings, but gradually moved into upscale multi-million-dollar properties. He appeared to make money on most of these deals, but he wasn't immune to losses. Paddock appears to have started his real estate investments in November of 1985 with the purchase of a modest house in Los Angeles on El Paso Drive. 2 years later, with the help of his mother, he bought a small apartment building, also in Los Angeles, for $725,000. Apartment buildings became a collector's item for Paddock in following years, with a property on Cornblum Avenue in southwest Los Angeles County and another on Doty Street in Hawthorne, California. He began to sell them off for profit in the early 2000s, with 4 sales in 2004 alone. He may have been preparing for what would be his biggest deal, a multi-story apartment complex on the north side of Mesquite, Texas, not far from the municipal golf course. Paddock borrowed $3.5 million to buy the property and sold it 8 years later for $4.6 million. There were also single-family home purchases along the way. A home in California City, California was bought in 1995 for $57,000 and presumably flipped a year later for $89,000. A home Paddock bought in Mesquite, Texas in 2004 was later transferred to his mother at a sales price of $159,375. She apparently lost money when she sold it in 2014 for $150,000. When his mother wanted to move to Florida, Paddock bought a brand new home for her in Melbourne. At least, that's what he told neighbor Don Judy. This one was another loss, purchased for $246,000 in 2013 and sold 2 years later for $235,000. Paddock's most recent purchase appears to have been a house on Babbling Brook Court in Mesquite, Nevada. He paid $369,022 for it in January of 2015. FBI agents spent Wednesday questioning Marilou Danley, the longtime girlfriend of the Las Vegas gunman and considered an integral key by authorities trying to understand what drove Stephen Paddock to open fire from his casino hotel room. Paddock killed at least 58 people and injured more than 500 on the Las Vegas Strip before killing himself. Danley was in the Philippines at the time of the attack and arrived in Los Angeles late Tuesday. She was met by FBI agents at the airport and questioned Wednesday. After being questioned, Danley said in a statement that she had no clue about his plans to carry out the massacre and pledged to cooperate with authorities struggling to determine what sparked the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history. "I knew Stephen Paddock as a kind, caring, quiet man," said Danley in a statement read by her lawyer Matthew Lombard, a criminal defense attorney. "He never said anything to me or took any action that I was aware of that I understood in any way to be a warning that something horrible like this was going to happen." Danley, 62, said Paddock bought her a ticket about 2 weeks ago to visit her family in the Philippines and then wired money to purchase a home for Danley and her family. "I was grateful, but honestly, I was worried. That first, the unexpected trip home, and then the money, was a way of breaking up with me," she said. "It never occurred to me in any way whatsoever that he was planning violence against anyone." As investigators continue to search for Paddock's motive and question Danley, new details have emerged about both. Danley is from the Philippines, but she lived for many years in Australia, where authorities have confirmed she is a citizen. Danley has 2 sisters who live in Australia, according to news outlets there and old Facebook posts by the sisters, which have been deleted in recent days. Australian media have identified the sisters as Liza Werner and Amelia Menango. On a Facebook account that has been deleted, Werner is friends with Danley's ex-husband and others Danley knew. And in a picture posted by Werner, Danley appears with the two women as well as Danley's daughter. The caption reads, "Sheila and the three sisters." The sisters did not respond to messages or calls, but two women identified as her sisters told an Australian television network Wednesday that they believe Paddock arranged Danley's trip to the Philippines so that she wouldn't interfere with his plans. "She was shocked to know she was leaving," the woman told 7 Network Australia on camera with their faces blurred. "He sent her away so that he can plan what he is planning without interruptions," one of the women said. "In that sense I thank him for sparing my sister's life, but that won't compensate the dead people's lives." Authorities say that before the shooting, Paddock transferred a large amount of money to the Philippines, close to $100,000. His brother, Eric Paddock, said he thought the gunman may have been trying to arrange for Danley to be abroad before carrying out the massacre. Danley is considered a critical witness in trying to decipher Paddock's motive, according to a person familiar with the probe. While investigators have described Danley as a person of interest, they have not suggested that she is considered an accomplice or involved in any way. Federal agents, who are assisting the Las Vegas police in the investigation, have essentially 2 critical questions for Danley. Did she have any idea what motivated him, and did she have any knowledge of what was about to take place and not alert authorities? Given how little has emerged in Paddock's past that could foreshadow the attack, the best lead is to this girlfriend, said Sen. Dean Heller, R. Nevada. The woman identified by 7 Network Australia as her sisters agreed. "No one can put the puzzles together, no one except Marilou," one of the women said. "Because Steve is not here to talk anymore, only Marilou can maybe help." She probably was even more shocked than us because she is more closer to him than us. "You know, to be able to find out the person you love and live with can do such a thing, and you thought you know the person yourself." How they met. As early as August 2013, Danley was already living with Paddock, according to public records. She was separated at that point but still married to another man, Gary Danley. Gary and Marilou Danley were married in Las Vegas in 1990. In 2002, Gary and Marilou Danley moved into a home in a brand new development in Sparks, Nevada. Like everyone else on the street, they bought the lot and had a home built on it, said John Heidenreich, her neighbor 2 doors down. He said the Danleys' house was the first completed in the 15-home neighborhood. He recalled Danley as a friendly woman who showed up at neighborhood barbecues and other social events on the block. Danley was working then as a high-limit hostess at the Atlantis Casino Resort Spa in Reno, Nevada. "I guess she just liked that casino lifestyle," Heidenreich said. "They seemed like great people," he said of the couple. Heidenreich said he was surprised when the couple separated. Danley's former stepdaughters, who now live in Arkansas, told local TV reporters that they separated in the spring of 2013, at which point Gary moved back to his native Arkansas. According to court records, the couple filed for divorce on February 25, 2015, and it was finalized the next day. During her divorce, Marilou Danley listed a downtown Reno apartment as her address, which was owned by Paddock. Paddock met Danley while she was working at the Atlantis Casino, said his brother Eric Paddock. Paddock was a frequent gambler at the casino where Danley once worked. He was such a regular that his entire family once took over the top floor at the casino's expense, his brother said. "They were adorable, big man, tiny woman. He loved her. He doted on her," Eric said at his home in Florida. "The two often gambled side by side," he said. Employees at a Starbucks in Mesquite, Nevada, however, described the couple's relationship differently. A supervisor at the coffee shop told the Los Angeles Times that Paddock often berated Danley in public. "The Starbucks is the only one in town and is inside the Virgin River Casino. It happened a lot," Esperanza Mendoza, supervisor of the Starbucks, told the Times. "He would verbally abuse her when Danley asked to use his casino card to buy food or other things inside the casino," Esperanza said. "He would glare down at her and say, with a mean attitude, 'You don't need my casino card for this. I'm paying for your drink, just like I'm paying for you.' Then she would softly say, 'Okay,' and step back behind him. He was so rude to her in front of us." The family. Danley has a daughter in Los Angeles and a grandchild, according to relatives and public records. Her daughter, Sheila Darcy Linton is an artist who lives in Los Angeles and is married to Michael Linton, scion of a wealthy business titan. Her father-in-law, Michael Linton, is the CEO of Prumga, a biochemistry company. The couple have one child together, according to a 2014 picture posted on Michael Linton's Facebook account, and they live in an expensive home in Venice with a market value of roughly $2 million. On Wednesday, the 5-bedroom home had sheets tacked up across the windows, preventing anyone from seeing inside, including TV news vans camped out in front waiting for any sign of Danley or her daughter. Danley's daughter describes herself online as an artist and tech worker. In a biography posted on her personal website, she cites her mother's strong influence on her. She said, "She tried to be a dutiful Asian daughter to make my mother proud by pursuing a degree in computer science in college." She later switched her focus to fine arts. She said, "Fortunately, my mother, who was shocked and disappointed, didn't dishonor or belittle my decision," Linton wrote. "Instead, she stood by me and demanded the same excellence in this path as she did in the last. Her love never wavered. It was merely my perspective of her that changed." Life with Paddock. At one point, Danley worked for an airline company, said Elizabeth Tyree, a neighbor in Reno, where Danley and Paddock lived together in a retirement community. Danley later worked for Raven, the cosmetics sales company, and tried to sell their products to other residents, Tyree said. Paddock, 64, bought and sold several properties in recent years as a way of making money, according to relatives and property records. The couple traveled all the time, never staying at any of their homes in Reno and Mesquite, Nevada, very long. Neighbors say the couple would disappear for long stretches, sometimes for months at a time. During Paddock's gambling trips to casinos in Mesquite, an hour's drive from Las Vegas, the couple left mixed impressions among residents. Many recalled seeing Paddock at a bar named Peggy Sue's and Eurico Casino. They described him as silent, sullen, never talking to anyone. He was a regular at the Virgin River, a smaller, dingy casino with card games and machines, from penny slots up to $1 machines. In Reno, neighbors also described Paddock as standoffish but recalled Danley as extremely sweet and friendly. Next-door neighbor Tyree said Danley hugged her when she saw her. This summer, Tyree saw Danley and Paddock moving a mattress and got a glimpse inside their garage, which was completely empty. Tyree asked Danley whether they were moving, and Danley said they had bought a new house but were not moving out of Reno. Another neighbor, Susan Page, who moved next door to the couple this summer, said she had not seen them since August. Paddock had recently bought a new silver minivan, she said, and Danley drove an SUV. On the third week of August, Paddock left the house. Soon after, Page said, Danley packed up her car as well, as if she were moving away. The gunman. More details have also emerged on Paddock, the gunman. From 1976 to 1985, Paddock worked federal government jobs, as a letter carrier for the Postal Service, an agent for the IRS and an auditor for U.S. government's Defense Contract Audit Agency, according to the Office of Personnel Management. Neighbors in several states where he owned homes and retirement communities described him as surly and unfriendly. Relatives say the roots of Paddock's loner lifestyle may have been planted July 28, 1960. On that day, when Paddock was 7, a neighbor from across the street took him swimming. The neighbor at the time told a local newspaper that she knew authorities were coming for his father, a bank robber, and she wanted to spare the boy the trauma of seeing his father hauled away by authorities. From that point on, Paddock's family was never the same. His mother struggled to raise him and his brothers on her own. His father escaped from prison twice, and had little more contact with them, relatives say. As they grew older, Stephen, the eldest, and the youngest brother, Eric, kept in touch, but Stephen Paddock drifted almost completely out of touch with his two other brothers, Bruce and Patrick. Eric said that Stephen stopped talking to his brother Bruce because Bruce used to beat him up when they were kids, and that Stephen stopped talking to Patrick because they're very different people. Even with Eric, he never talked much. They created a lucrative real estate investment business together, but Stephen would only text Eric now and then. We didn't talk much. We talked when there was something to talk about, Eric Paddock said. Steve had no help. Steve did not take help. He was a standalone guy. Choking up as he talked, Eric said, Steve was like a dad surrogate. He took me camping. I liked my brother. He was a good guy. High school. Stephen Paddock went to John H. Francis Polytechnic High School in the Los Angeles suburbs, his brother said. Judy Smith Nelson, a retired federal worker living in Las Vegas, was stunned when she first saw that she and the alleged shooter were the same age, 64. Then a friend texted her a picture from an old high school yearbook. I couldn't believe it. I recognized the face. We had been classmates, Nelson said Tuesday. As investigators continued searching for a motive, anyone who had come into contact with Paddock over more than 4 decades began to wrestle with what they knew of the man and whether there had ever been clues of what would come. Former California State Senator Richard Alarcon, who had gotten his start as student body president of John H. Francis Polytechnic High School in 1971, posted a note to friends on Facebook on Tuesday saying he remembered playing basketball with Paddock at a neighborhood court. Another classmate remembered Paddock showing up at a 20-year reunion and repeatedly angling to talk to her. Nelson, in Las Vegas, fished through an old box of keepsakes and found a 10-year reunion program that contained a one-line description that each classmate had written. Paddock's read, single, accountant, has traveled to Hollywood, lives in Sepulveda, California. We're all just reeling, and here I have kind of a personal connection, being that we walked the same grounds, we were from the same area, Nelson said. After high school, Paddock attended Cal State Northridge. He was married and divorced twice. Both ex-wives, one in the Los Angeles area, the other in the Dallas suburbs, declined to talk to reporters. Julie Tate, Abigail Haslauner, Aaron Davis and Mark Berman in Washington, Ali Gravina in Reno, Nevada, William Dalber and Becca Rothschild in Los Angeles, Barbara Liston in Orlando, and Michael Lyle in Mesquite, Nevada, contributed to this report, which has been updated.